In the last year of Jesus' public ministry, opposition from the scribes, the Pharisees and the priests was increasing against him. He's had several delegations of Pharisees coming to find fault with him, to challenge him, to ask him for a sign, seeking to discredit him. And he has responded by trying to keep out of their way. He's not interested in having arguments with the Pharisees. He calls them blind guides. No, but he is still interested in meeting with the people and giving them the opportunity to believe in him. John the Baptist has been executed by Herod, which is a sure sign to Jesus of what lies ahead of him. And so at the end of chapter 8, we have Jesus focusing on his disciples, preparing them for what lies ahead. From verse 22 we read, "Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him, and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. Then he put his hands on his eyes again, and made him look up. And he was restored, and saw everything clearly. Then they sent him away to his house, saying, Neither go into the town, nor tell anyone in the town." My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share these verses together. This is a very remarkable miracle because Jesus did it in stages. Why stages? Because at this stage he is seeking to open the eyes of his disciples. They have come to believe in him, and they think they can see what will happen next. But they cannot see clearly yet, and he's going to lead them on a journey where their eyes need to be opened. But to do so, he needs to go out of town. He needs to lay his hands on them. They need to experience him, a deep personal experience of him, so that ultimately they will see clearly. The aim of the exercise is not just to give physical sight, but it is that people recognise that Jesus is the Son of God. And so often our preaching is very superficial. We offer Jesus as a panacea for all our aches and pains, rather than saying, look, Jesus is the creator of the world, who wants us to be in fellowship with him and to walk with him. It's not about removing our aches and pains in the short term. It's about giving us understanding in the long term. So after this miracle, we read from verse 27, Now Jesus and his disciples went out to the towns of Caesarea Philippi, and on the road he asked his disciples, saying to them, Who do men say that I am? So they answered, John the Baptist. But some say Elijah, and others one of the prophets. He said to them, But who do you say that I am? Peter answered and said to him, You are the Christ. Then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about him. Caesarea Philippi is a town northeast of Galilee. So he's heading inland, actually toward Mount Hermon, the headwaters of the Jordan River. This instruction to Peter not to reveal the fact that Jesus is the Christ is akin to the many times he had told those who had experienced his miracles not to tell anyone. Just in the previous verse we read, Neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. After he had given sight to the blind man was not to tell anybody about this. And that's exactly what Jesus is saying now. When Peter says you are the Christ, Jesus does not deny it, but he says don't tell anyone about it. Now later he would commission them to tell, but at this present time it's not appropriate because the popular understanding of what Christ will do is not what is going to happen now. If the crowd decided to come and make Jesus the king by force, it would just bring a civil war into the country. And Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He's not there to drive out the Romans in the short term. First of all, he is there that people might begin to live his way and adopt his thinking. And only when people have acclaimed him as their king and begun to walk in his ways will he lead them in victory against their enemies. We know that when Christ returns, he will establish peace on the earth. But he is not going to return until the Jewish people acclaim him as the Christ. And at this time, they are not doing so. He's not about causing a civil war, causing deaths and bloodshed as people line up behind two different causes. And so, yes, Peter, you're right. You understand that I am the Messiah. But now I have to teach you how I'm going to proceed to establish my kingdom. You think you see, but you don't see at all, just as the previous miracle indicated. Part of the truth is there, but the full understanding is not. And, of course, that's immediately explained in the next verse, verse 31. He says, "And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again." He spoke this word openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." What a rebuke for Peter! But Peter was simply the spokesman for all the disciples. They had followed Jesus in the anticipation that he was the Christ, and their expectation was that the Christ would drive out the Romans and establish Israel as the chief of the nations. Well, that will happen, as the prophets had predicted. But that's not the immediate future. The thing that they need to face is what Jesus is telling them now. He began to teach them that the Son of Man, he refers to himself as the Son of Man, a title used in Daniel referring to the Messiah. The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. This was just too incredible for the disciples to understand. They could see that Jesus was the Messiah, but it made absolutely no sense that he should die. The whole point of the exercise is that he should be victorious. They do not understand at this stage that the first enemy that Jesus has to defeat is death, and to do that he needs to be killed. But the other thing that they hadn't fully appreciated was the intensity of the opposition from the elders and chief priests and scribes. The leaders of the nation would repudiate their king. They would say, "We do not want this man to be king over us." And when they could find no fault in him at all, they trotted out the old convenient one of blasphemy. He says he is the Messiah, but he's not, so we'll kill him. He says he's the Son of God, but he's not. We'll kill him. But of course you don't dare seek any evidence concerning those matters, because if they had done their research and looked for the evidence, then they could come to no other conclusion. What is the evidence that Jesus is the Christ? Well, he was born King of the Jews, and even Pilate could come to that conclusion. What is the evidence that he is the Son of God? The very miracles that he performed, the teaching that he gave, the fact that they could find no fault in him at all spoke to that truth. But this was too incredible, too left field for the disciples at this stage to take in. And so Peter said, No way, we haven't followed you all the way just so that you can get killed. No way. When Peter says this, Jesus looks at him, but looks at all the disciples. He is searching them. Do they think the same way as Peter? Have they followed him in vain? Are they really in love with him as he is, or are they just joining a bandwagon thinking that he's going to do something which he is not going to do?